Haunted U has returned now that school's back in session, and for those unfamiliar with my Haunted U series, this is where I take us across the US and I talk about different haunted universities and colleges. And today, I'll be opening up Haunted U with the University of Georgia. Now, it's important that for all of these stories I set the stage because establishing how old some of these universities are definitely helps set the stage for the story. Now, Georgia is one of the original 13 colonies. It was described as a buffer state at one point, but one of the interesting things about this story is that the University of Georgia is the first chartered university in the United States, which means the University of Georgia's roots go back to the late 1790s. Now, because this school is so old, it means that it's been present for every single one of the US's major conflicts, to include the Civil War. Now, strangely enough, although Georgia, unlike our other SEC school, had no active role in the Civil War simply because it was closed, many of the buildings were used for various purposes. Hospitals, barracks, lodging, refugee camps. And as you might figure, with war comes death, and the University of Georgia has seen its fair share. Now let's go ahead and get into the first story of the night. Before going into this story, I should add that the University of Georgia is home to many ghosts, many sightings, many odd occurrences, weird events. So just keep that in mind as I tell this story. And because there are so many ghosts at the university, I'm only going to limit this one to like 5 or 6 stories. Anyways, moving into the first tale of the night, we have Robert Toombs Oak. Now, it's really not a place at all. It's just a stump in the middle of 2 different buildings, but it's labeled Robert Toombs Oak because at one time there stood an oak tree. The story goes that there was a student named Robert Toombs. Robert Toombs was a bit mischievous and he got expelled from the University of Georgia for gambling or something similar. But it's said that Robert Toombs still haunts this oak because at the time of his death, years later, it is said that this oak tree, which sits next to Demosthenian Hall, was struck by lightning at the exact time of his death. Now, of course, to me, that sounds more like an urban legend, but it is said that the ghost of Robert Toombs has been seen in Demosthenian Hall. And it doesn't shock me. This is one of the oldest buildings on Georgia's campus, so it has seen its fair share of events. But people have reported seeing Robert Toombs himself wandering the halls of the building and some of the grounds, although there are some other events happening in that building that have yet to be explained. Now on to our second story of the night. So this next story takes us to a building called Joe Brown Hall. And this building is described as being Winchester-esque with a stairwell that leads up to a wall to nowhere. However, there is a picture of the rest of the hallway. The story in this building is that a student passed away here. The circumstances around his death are pretty mysterious. There have been some suggestions, though, that are a bit sordid. I digress. The student was unalived. He was found in this building by a custodian who was working there at the time. The stench is what drew the custodian to that area, and upon finding this unalived student, he called the authorities. They came in and did what they did. However, it's said that although the student died, he never really left, and some have reported seeing his ghost wandering the halls. Not to mention, there is a creepy stairwell that leads to nowhere. So, you do the math. If you've experienced any ghost here, go ahead and drop it in the comments. Now, the next story on our list takes place at a building called Waddell Hall. Or maybe it's Waddle Hall. Just drop it in the comments. Now, I have conflicting stories on the incidents that took place here, but some characterize this as a lover spat gone wrong. Others characterize it as a random murder-suicide that took the lives of 2 students, or at least 2 friends of students. In the first version of this story, a man returns from World War I. He has some PTSD. He has his girlfriend who's living in this building, or at least visiting a friend in this building. He goes to visit her. A fight breaks out, and he unalives the girl. I don't know if he manages to take himself out, but he definitely takes her out. The second story is a little bit more ambiguous, at least in my opinion. There were 3 students that were living in this building, which was a dorm during World War I. The gentleman from the previous story comes back from the war, and he's hanging out with a classmate of his who's a female. It starts raining one night. They rush over to this building seeking shelter, and the 2 of them, along with the 3 students who live in this building, of course there are more, but for the story, it's just 3 of them. And they start talking, they hang out all night. 3 of them go to bed, and the soldier who came back and the girl are discussing things when all of a sudden, the guy executes them both, resulting in a red rum unaliving. Nobody understands why it happens, but to me, the first story sounds a bit more feasible, sounds like a lover's quarrel. She didn't want to get back with him. He decided to take matters into his own hands, but This is one where the jury's still out, and if you have any personal tales or information, please drop it below. The next building on our list is the T.R.R. Cobb House. Now, T.R.R. Cobb was a prominent politician, previous Confederate soldier for the Confederate States of America. He was also known to be extremely wealthy and responsible for some of the infrastructure happening at the University of Georgia, amongst other things. One of which is creating a school that his sister could attend after receiving anonymous letters from her throwing shade. Anyways, it's said that you can still see his ghost wandering the halls of his home here, and much like the other buildings on this list, it's not uncommon to see one or more specters here. Of course, this building is one of the older ones on campus, but still not the oldest. And the last story on our list takes us to Candler Hall. Currently, it's the International Affairs Building, but back in 1905, it was a dorm. The story goes that back in November of 1905, there was a student named Willie Sam Lloyd. He was heading back up to his room because there was nothing to do, where he took out a pistol and started playing with it. Sadly, the pistol went off, he shot himself in the stomach, and he felt the entirety of that bullet and the wound for 45 minutes before he passed away. And his ghost is said to haunt the building, amongst others. Anyways, I want to know if you guys enjoyed these tales. If you've had any experiences at the University of Georgia with the other side, drop it in the comments or feel free to DM me. And again, I want to know what you guys are thinking about this series. Do you like it? Please weigh in the comments, and I will see you guys in my next video. Now, one of the things that I wanted to point out about Robert Toombs Oak is that it reminds me a lot of a place at the University of Alabama called the Mound. Now, although they don't actually have much in common with each other, I always think it's weird when a piece of nature or a landscape is haunted. So not like a house or a building or something, but like a rock. And of course, Gettysburg is known for these types of fixtures. But anyways, on an aside.